The biting wind of Red Hollow swept between snow-dusted tombstones, carrying with it the melancholy toll of the local church bells. Officer Logan Carter stood motionless before the small casket. His red-rimmed eyes were fixed on the metal plaque that bore the name Axel. His trembling fingers traced the K9 insignia one last time, an emblem that would now rest forever with his four-legged partner. He died as he lived, protecting others, the police chief said. The words rang hollow in Logan's ears as a small crowd huddled around him beneath the gray winter sky. The entire community of Red Hollow had come to pay their respects. Familiar faces, local merchants, and fellow officers, all united by their admiration for the dog who had become a symbol of loyalty in the small American town. Dana Hale, the veterinarian who had fought for hours to save Axel, kept her distance. Her face was etched with the professional defeat that still haunted her. "He was more than a police dog," Logan murmured, tossing a handful of earth onto the casket. "He was the best friend anyone could ask for." He felt the weight of Inspector Carl Simmons's hand on his shoulder. His longtime friend offered words of comfort that were lost to the frigid air. In that moment, all Logan could feel was the void left by Axel, the partner who had never hesitated, who had never betrayed him. The ceremony slowly concluded. One by one, the mourners dispersed, leaving behind only the scent of cold earth and frozen flowers. Logan remained, unable to take the final step that would mean abandoning Axel forever. The sky was darkening when he finally headed to the parking lot, his feet sinking into the fresh snow. It was then that he noticed the small piece of paper tucked under the windshield wiper of his patrol car. He thought it was just a flyer, but something compelled him to grab it. His eyes scanned the words written in cursive. "Axel didn't die the way you think." The world seemed to freeze around Logan. His heart hammered against his ribs as he reread the message, searching for any clue as to who might have left it. The now empty cemetery held only silence as its witness. Those 7 simple words transformed his weary resignation into a corrosive doubt. Who could know something about Axel's death that he didn't? Why now? Why like this? Logan crumpled the note in his pocket and looked one last time at the mound of earth that covered his partner. The truth, he realized, might be buried just as deep as Axel, in the frozen roots of the town he had always called home. In that moment, he decided his grief would now fuel a hunt for the truth, an investigation that would begin that very night, even if it meant defying the entire Red Hollow Police Department. The cold winter morning light struggled to pierce the windows of the Red Hollow precinct. Logan Carter, his eyes red from sleepless nights, typed frantically at his keyboard. Since Axel's funeral, a single thought consumed him: find answers. The anonymous note had planted a seed of doubt that was now growing like a weed in his mind. File not found. The message flashed on the screen as he tried to access the dashcam recordings from the day Axel was shot. Logan scowled, trying again. Impossible. The records, which should have been archived for at least 5 years, had vanished without a trace. "Problem, Carter?" The familiar voice of Carl Simmons echoed behind him. The inspector approached, coffee in hand, his appearance as impeccable as ever. "The recordings from my unit are gone," Logan replied, carefully watching his colleague's reaction. "You know anything about it?" Carl shrugged, a gesture far too casual for the gravity of the situation. "Systems fail, especially in this bitter cold." Logan pulled up the server's access log. Only 2 names had appeared in the last 48 hours: his own and Carl Simmons. Interesting. Looks like you accessed the system late last night, he commented, keeping his tone neutral as his heart began to race. Anything specific? The inspector took a long sip of coffee. Administrative routine. You're not the only one who works late, my friend. The word friend struck a dissonant chord. For 15 years, the two officers had shared patrols, family dinners, and Sunday fishing trips. Now, an invisible chasm was opening between them. You know, Carl, Axel deserves justice. He wasn't just a dog. Nobody's saying otherwise, the inspector replied, placing a hand on Logan's shoulder. But you need to move on. Accidents happen in this line of work. The once comforting touch now felt like ice against his skin. Logan watched his old friend walk down the hall, greeting other officers with smiles and pats on the back. That afternoon, Logan noticed averted gazes and hushed conversations that fell silent when he entered a room. Even the rookie at the front desk seemed uneasy in his presence. Paranoia began to seep into the precinct walls like winter damp. Sitting at his desk, Logan stared at a framed photo of him and Carl smiling beside Axel after a successful operation. The truth was in there somewhere, between the smiles and the secrets. And if the conspiracy was inside the Red Hollow Police Department itself, who could he possibly trust? Snow fell softly as Logan Carter parked his patrol car in front of the Red Hollow Veterinary Clinic. The official report on Axel's death played over and over in his mind. Something didn't add up. With a heavy heart, he clutched the crumpled document in his hand before stepping out into the biting cold. Dana Hale greeted him with cautious eyes. The vet maintained a reserved posture, but Logan recognized something familiar in her gaze, the same suspicion that now consumed him. I need you to exhume Axel, he said, getting straight to the point. I know it sounds crazy, but this report doesn't make any sense. Dana hesitated, adjusting her glasses as she studied the officer. Do you understand what you're asking? This could cost you your badge. I've already lost a lot more than that, he replied. The following night, under the dark cloak of Red Hollow, the two met at the cemetery. The frigid Colorado wind cut at their faces as they worked in grim silence. Once they had finally recovered Axel's body, the vet led them back to her clinic through a rear entrance. Under the cold laboratory lights, Donna worked meticulously. Logan stood motionless, watching her every move, every subtle shift in her expression. Suddenly, she froze. I found something, she murmured, pointing to a tiny mark on the dog's neck. This is not consistent with a gunshot wound. The officer moved closer, a pit forming in his stomach. What is it then? An injection mark, she answered, her voice trembling. Your partner was sedated before the shot. Logan's blood ran cold. Axel hadn't just been killed, he'd been executed. I've seen this before, Dana confessed, stepping away from the examination table. In Boulder 3 years ago, I tried to report it and lost my license for 6 months. No one wanted to listen. Their eyes met in a moment of silent understanding. The vet had fought the system and lost, bearing the invisible scars of that battle. This time will be different, Logan promised. Dana looked at Axel's still form for a long moment. These animals dedicate their lives to protecting people. They deserve more than to be discarded and forgotten. She hesitated, then walked to a locked file cabinet. I've been holding on to evidence. I thought I'd never have the courage to use it. Logan watched as she removed a thin folder. Why help me now? Because you still care, she answered simply. and because Axel deserves justice. That cold night, surrounded by medical equipment and the body of a loyal dog, an unlikely alliance was forged. The mark on Axel's neck wasn't just a piece of evidence. It was the first concrete link in a chain that Logan was determined to follow to the very end. The cardboard box was in the back of the closet, covered in a thin layer of dust. Logan Carter pulled it out carefully, feeling the weight of memories before he even opened it. Inside were all of Axel's belongings: his first collar, chewed-up toys, training medals, and at the bottom, a small recording device they used during field exercises. The officer connected the device to his computer, more as a ritual of grief than with any expectation of finding something. That's when he noticed it. On the last recording, dated 3 days before Axel's death, there was an unusual sequence of barks: 3 short, 2 long, a pause, and then 3 short again. That's not normal, Logan murmured to himself, listening to the recording for a third time. Axel never barked in such a specific pattern. The dog was trained for precise communication, and that repetition felt intentional. The next morning, his face etched with the deep shadows of a sleepless night, Logan drove to the vet clinic. Dana Hale greeted him with a tired smile, but her eyes widened when she heard the recording. "That sounds like Morse code," the vet commented, leaning over the desk. "My father was a ham radio operator. That pattern isn't random. Do you think... was Axel trying to tell you something?" Logan's voice cracked slightly. "He was trying to warn me." For the next 2 hours, they worked on the decryption. Dana pulled an old book on Morse code from her shelf, and together they translated the barks into letters. APEX, Dana finally spelled out. "Does that mean anything to you?" Logan felt a chill run down his spine. Apex Tactical Security, a company that had started supplying equipment to the department about 8 months ago. The discovery reignited something in him, a mixture of searing pain and renewed hope. As he drove home, the recording saved on his device. He couldn't shake the thought that even in his final moments, Axel was still his partner, still trying to protect him. "You were always smarter than all of us, partner," he murmured into the empty car. The bond between them, seemingly stronger than death itself, had just become the key to unraveling the entire mystery. And Logan wouldn't rest until he honored his loyal companion's final message. The wind cut through the icy trails of Red Hollow like invisible blades. Logan Carter walked cautiously, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness as snow crunched under his boots. After weeks immersed in reports and theories, he needed the cold air to clear his head. The investigation into Axel's death was consuming his days and nights, turning him into a shadow of the officer he used to be. That's when something glinted in the snow-covered brush. Logan moved closer, kneeling to examine the object. A worn leather collar, partially buried in the ice, with the initials MH engraved on a metal plate. A shiver ran through him that had nothing to do with the cold. Tucking the collar into his pocket, he continued his walk, his steps now more determined. Not far from there, he spotted an abandoned cabin he knew well, an old forest ranger station, decommissioned for years. The door creaked open as he pushed it, revealing a dusty, dark interior. The next morning, Logan searched the precinct's archives, taking advantage of Carl's absence. His fingers trembled as he typed MH and K9 into the system. The result appeared almost instantly. Maven Huntsman, a sniffer dog reported missing 8 months prior. The report, signed by Carl Simmons himself, classified the case as an escape during pursuit. Maven. Logan whispered, the name echoing in his mind as he studied the photo of the dark-coated German shepherd. When Logan visited the vet clinic, Dana Hale examined the collar carefully. "This is very strange," she said, pointing to the wear marks. "It looks like someone tried to scrape the initials off." As Logan dug deeper into Maven's case, he discovered something even more disturbing. The dog's disappearance coincided with that of Tommy Reynolds, a 9-year-old boy who was never found. The case had been shelved as inconclusive after weeks of fruitless searching. "It can't be a coincidence," Logan told Detective Sarah Quinlan when they met discreetly in the diner's parking lot. The detective agreed, her eyes reflecting the same deep concern. "We need to reopen the Reynolds case. If Maven was tracking the boy, then something happened to both of them," Logan finished, the reality of it all crashing down on him like an avalanche. That night, staring at a map of Red Hollow spread across his desk, the officer connected 2 points with a red line: the spot where Axel had been shot, and the location where he'd found Maven's collar. His heart hammered in his chest as he realized they formed a straight line, pointing directly to the facilities of Apex Tactical Security. Logan finally understood. Axel hadn't been the only victim. He was facing something much bigger, a scheme that swallowed dogs and children whole, leaving no trace behind. And now, with each new discovery, he was becoming an increasingly visible target. The frigid red hollow wind cut across Logan Carter's face as he followed the coordinates scribbled on the crumpled paper Dana had given him. Behind him, Echo, a K9 who had survived the Apex scheme, sniffed the air with a deep-seated distrust. The dog was still wary, but something in its canine instinct seemed to guide it with purpose through the snow-covered cemetery. "It has to be around here," Logan murmured, scanning the ancient headstones. Echo barked once, a sharp sound in the muffled silence, and bolted toward a small, abandoned mausoleum. The officer followed, noticing the rusted metal door was slightly ajar. After a few minutes of straining against the entrance, he managed to force it open. An unmistakable odor of oxidized metal and old cedar flooded his nostrils. Logan flicked on his flashlight, its beam revealing a steep staircase that plunged into the depths of the earth. Echo hesitated, but followed him down, its tense body suggesting a grim familiarity with the place. At the bottom of the tunnel, the discovery was devastating. A series of rusted cages lined the damp wall. In each one lay old collars and identification tags. On a makeshift table, the veterinarian found records stacked high. Files for retired or problematic K9s, all stamped in red ink with the words, "Terminal Reconditioning." "My God," he whispered, his stomach churning. They were using this place to eliminate dogs that no longer served their purpose. In a corner, he found restraints and empty chemical vials. Dana had mentioned the injection mark on Axel. Now it all made a horrifying kind of sense. The dogs weren't just being discarded. They were being used in some kind of experiment before their disposal. Eco whimpered, the scent and sight of the place triggering a memory. The animal huddled close to one particular cage, and Logan understood. This had likely been its prison. With trembling hands, the officer photographed every inch of the site, documenting the atrocity. Among the files, he found the Apex Tactical Security logo stamped on several documents, alongside the signatures of local officials, including that of Carl Simmons. The revelation hit Logan like an avalanche. It wasn't just his old friend or a few corrupt cops. It was an entire system, rooted in the city's very structure, willing to do anything to protect its secrets. Dogs, children, lives. all disposable in the face of Apex's dark interests. "Let's get out of here," he said to the dog, securing the evidence. "We need to show this to Sarah and Dana." As they climbed back to the surface, Logan Carter knew he had crossed a point of no return. Justice for Axel now meant confronting forces far more powerful than he had ever imagined. Dana Hale was checking the trail cameras she'd installed near the frozen creek when she spotted a familiar shadow moving between the snow-laden trees. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she recognized the silhouette of a German shepherd, one that looked hauntingly like Maven, the K9 who had vanished months ago. She quickly snapped photos of the animal from a distance and sent them to Logan Carter. "This can't be a coincidence," Logan muttered, examining the pictures on his phone. After weeks of frustrating dead ends, this was the first concrete lead that might connect the scattered dots. The next morning, the officer and the veterinarian set up a small camp near the sighting. The biting cold of Red Hollow felt even more intense by the frozen water, but their shared determination was stronger than any discomfort. "He's malnourished and probably traumatized," Dana explained, preparing a humane trap baited with food. "We need absolute patience." For 3 days, Logan returned to the spot, leaving food and sitting at a safe distance, motionless for hours. On the 4th day, Maven finally appeared, his eyes watchful, his posture defensive. The dog kept its distance, but with each passing day, it crept a little closer. "It's okay, buddy," Logan would whisper, remaining perfectly still as the animal sniffed at the offering. Dana watched from afar, amazed by the man's patience. On the 7th attempt, Maven allowed Logan to briefly touch his head. It was then that the officer noticed the strange marks on his collar. Not just the initials MH, but an alphanumeric code engraved on the inside. AP7. "Apex," Logan murmured, a chill running down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold. In the days that followed, Maven began to exhibit peculiar behaviors. The dog reacted with terror to certain metallic sounds and showed extreme agitation near vehicles bearing the Apex Tactical Security logo. "He's been conditioned," Dana explained after observing the animal for hours. "These reactions aren't natural. They were implanted." Examining Maven more closely, the vet found minuscule surgical scars near the base of his skull. "Implants of some kind," she concluded, horror lacing her voice. The puzzle was beginning to take shape. Apex wasn't just eliminating retired K9s. They were using them for some kind of experiment. And most disturbing of all, the same behavioral patterns had been observed in Aiden, the missing child. "They're using the same methods on children and dogs," Logan said, his voice trembling with rage. "And Maven might be our only living witness." That night, as Maven finally slept curled at the foot of his bed, the officer understood he had found much more than a lost dog. He had found the key to exposing the entire criminal operation. The bell over the diner door chimed as Logan Carter pushed through the glass, clouded with steam from coffee cups. The scent of apple pie and fried eggs filled the cozy space that had served as Red Hollow's meeting point for generations. His eyes scanned the room until he found his man. Carl Simmons sat in a corner booth, stirring his coffee distractedly. The inspector looked up as Logan approached, his usual smile vanishing when he saw the determined look on his former partner's face. "We need to talk," Logan said, sitting without an invitation. "About Axel." Carl sighed, shifting his weight. "I thought we were past this, Logan. It was a tragic accident. We have to move on." "An accident? With deleted camera files and an injection mark that doesn't appear on the official report?" Logan kept his voice low but firm. Who else had access to those files besides you and me, Carl? The inspector pushed his cup away, visibly uncomfortable. Are you accusing me of something? We were friends, Logan. We were, Logan stressed, until I found a collar with the initials MH near that tunnel. Maven wasn't the only one, was he? A few feet away, in a booth by the window, Detective Sarah Quinlan pretended to read the local paper while carefully observing the exchange. The widow brought her cup to her lips, hiding her expression of growing interest. You're spiraling, Carl shot back, but his restless gaze darted around the diner. Axel's death has affected your judgment. Logan leaned forward. And Apex? Are you going to tell me you've never heard of them? The company's name caused a subtle but perceptible reaction. Carl swallowed hard before answering. Don't connect things that have no connection. I have enough to take this further, Logan bluffed. If you had proof, you wouldn't be here. Carl regained his composure and stood up. Take care of yourself, Logan. This obsession is only going to hurt you. As the inspector left the diner, Sarah discreetly folded her newspaper. She had noticed the inconsistencies in Carl's answers, the poorly disguised nervousness when the company was mentioned. After years of investigating difficult cases, the detective recognized guilt when she saw it. Logan remained seated, watching through the window as Carl got into his vehicle. He didn't notice when Sarah passed his table, dropping a business card with her phone number on it. Maybe we need to talk, she murmured without breaking her stride. About justice. The officer looked at the card, then at the detective's retreating silhouette. For the first time in weeks, he felt he was no longer alone in his search. Sarah Quinlan watched the diner through the fogged-up window of her car. The detective wasn't there by chance. Ever since the confrontation between Logan Carter and Carl Simmons, she had been keeping a discreet watch on the inspector. A widow for 3 years, Sarah carried invisible scars that made her particularly sensitive to injustice. When Carl entered the diner for his morning coffee, she adjusted the recording device in her pocket and followed him inside. She chose a nearby table, ordered only a coffee, and feigned interest in the local paper while straining to hear. Minutes later, a man in a suit joined the inspector. The Apex contracts are secure, Carl said in a low voice. But we need to contain Carter. He's digging where he shouldn't be. The man in the suit nodded. We have concerned investors. Some truths are best left buried, like that dog of his. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. The mention of Axel confirmed her suspicions. She remained motionless, pretending to be engrossed in the news, as the conversation continued with details of payments and necessary contingencies. That afternoon, the detective sought out Logan at his home. She found him looking gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes, but a resolve that was unshakable. I have something you need to hear, she said, handing him the recording device. As they listened together, Sarah watched Logan's face harden. The betrayal of his former friend was now documented, no longer just a suspicion. Why are you helping me? He finally asked. Because I've buried too many people without answers, the detective replied, her gaze distant for a moment. And because Red Hollow deserves better than this. In the days that followed, a silent alliance was forged. Sarah brought information from the precinct while Logan shared his findings from the tunnel and the evidence Dana Hale had collected. Together, they began to map the extent of the corruption surrounding Apex Tactical Security. This is bigger than we imagined, Sarah commented as they organized documents on Logan's kitchen table. This isn't just about Axel or Maven. It's about an entire system. Logan nodded, stroking Eco, who now rarely left his side. This is the first concrete evidence we can take to the feds. We have to be careful, she warned. Carl has connections everywhere. The trust between them grew with each passing day. They shared not only information, but also the weight of facing a dark truth and the risk of challenging powerful people. United by their thirst for justice, they knew they were only at the beginning of a battle that would change the fate of Red Hollow forever. The biting wind of Red Hollow seemed to whisper secrets as Logan Carter walked along the edge of the forest. Snow crunched under his boots, and at his side, Eco moved with cautious steps. The K9, still distrustful after everything he had endured, kept a safe distance. But there was something different about his demeanor tonight. Suddenly, Eco stopped. His ears pricked up in alert, and he began to dig frantically near an old pine tree that stood out against the white landscape. Logan watched, intrigued, as the animal worked with a determined, almost desperate energy. "What did you find, boy?" the officer murmured, kneeling beside the dog. His gloved hands took over where Eco had started. The earth was hard with frost, but not impossible to break. After a few minutes of digging, his fingers brushed against something solid, a small, hermetically sealed plastic case containing a USB drive. Logan's heart hammered in his chest. He glanced around, suddenly aware of how vulnerable he was. The trees, once mere silhouettes against the night sky, now seemed like potential hiding places for watchful eyes. Back in his apartment, with the curtains drawn and Eco standing a restless guard by the door, the ex-officer plugged the drive into his computer. What he found made his stomach lurch. Detailed spreadsheets of payments from Apex Tactical Security to local police officers, and audio recordings of meetings where Carl Simmons openly discussed how to solve the Axel problem. "My God," Logan whispered, running a hand over his face. One recording in particular froze his blood. The voice of his former friend, cold and clear, giving a direct order. "The dog saw too much. He needs to be neutralized before Carter realizes what's happening." The evidence was irrefutable. Apex wasn't just bribing cops. They were eliminating any threat to their operation, including trained K9s who could identify their illicit activities. Logan saved everything to another device and hid the original. He knew that his every move would now be monitored. The truth he had so desperately sought was finally in his hands, but it also made him an even bigger target. In Red Hollow, where the cold preserved secrets for generations, he had just unearthed the most dangerous one of all. Looking at Eco, who had finally fallen asleep on the worn rug, Logan knew that justice for Axel was closer, but also riskier than ever before. "We're alone in this, partner," he murmured to the sleeping dog. "And they're everywhere." Logan Carter's badge landed on the captain's desk with a heavy thud that seemed to echo through the Red Hollow precinct. The charges were clear: trespassing on private property at the cemetery and unauthorized disclosure of confidential department information. The suspension came as no surprise, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. "You crossed every line this time, Carter," the captain said, avoiding his gaze. 2 months. No badge, no pay. Consider yourself lucky you're not being arrested." Logan walked out of the station under the mixed stares of his colleagues, some of pity, others of disapproval. News traveled fast in the small, snow-covered town. By the end of the day, everyone would know that the officer who mourned his dead dog was now being punished for trying to prove a conspiracy many considered a delusion born of grief. At the local diner where he used to have coffee every morning, the owner barely acknowledged him. The town paper had his name on the front page, branding him an obsessed cop, a disturber of the peace. The isolation was a physical thing, a deep, gnawing cold that had nothing to do with the Colorado winter settling around him. At home, sitting on the porch as snow drifted down, Logan felt a warm presence at his side. Eco, the once skittish K9, laid down near his feet, looking up at him with a loyalty that seemed to defy the world. The dog, who weeks ago had barely allowed a touch, now offered the only comfort Logan could accept. "It's just us now, partner," he murmured, running his fingers through the animal's thick fur. Dana Hale called 3 times that night, but he let each call go to voicemail. The veterinarian was trying to help, but Logan knew the more people he involved, the more they had to lose. Sarah Quinlan sent a single, discreet text. "Keep going. I'm working behind the scenes." Stripped of his badge and official authority, but armed with a determination that grew with every obstacle, Logan had transformed his living room into an improvised investigation hub. Photos, documents, and notes has plastered the walls. The sting of institutional betrayal, especially from his old friend Carl Simmons, didn't paralyze him. It fueled him. As the town slept under its white winter blanket, Logan and Eco remained awake, united by a mission that transcended rules and regulations. Justice for Axel and for the others would not be buried under the snow of Red Hollow. The nights in Red Hollow grew longer, heavier. Since his suspension, sleep had become a battlefield where memories and guilt waged a relentless war. Lying in bed, Logan stared at the ceiling as Eco whimpered softly at his feet, as if sharing the same nightmares. On one particularly cold dawn, Logan fell into a dream so vivid it felt less like a creation of his exhausted mind and more like a memory clawing its way to the surface. He was back in that fateful afternoon, the biting Colorado wind whipping his face as Axel sniffed the perimeter of an abandoned warehouse. The radio in his cruiser crackled with Captain Reeves's authoritative voice. "Carter, stand down. I repeat, fall back from that position." In the dream, unlike in his conscious memory, Logan could see the hesitation in his K9 partner's eyes. Axel seemed to be trying to communicate something, his alert gaze fixed not on the warehouse, but on a flicker of movement in the shadows to the side. Seconds later, the shot that changed everything. The blood on the snow. Axel's final gaze. Logan woke with a start, sweating despite the chill. Eco lifted his head, alert. "It was a setup," Logan whispered, stroking the surviving dog's fur. "They used Axel as bait, and they pulled me away on purpose." The next morning, his face etched with dark circles, he revisited his personal files. He found the call log from that day. Reeves had never given a satisfactory reason for the stand-down order. Dana's words echoed in his mind. The injection mark doesn't match the official story. Sitting in his modest kitchen, Logan stared at a photograph of himself and Carl Simmons, smiling in their early academy days. The betrayal now felt infinitely deeper. It wasn't just corruption. It was a calculated manipulation that had cost him his most loyal partner. The guilt he carried was slowly hardening into a dark resolve. He wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. He was fighting for redemption. "I'm going to clear your name, partner," he promised, his eyes on Axel's collar hanging by the door. Eco nudged his hand with his snout, as if sealing a silent pact between the three of them. The man, the living dog, and the memory of what could never be forgotten. Sarah Quinlan arrived at Logan Carter's apartment with a manila folder tucked under her arm, the dark circles under her eyes revealing her own sleepless nights. She spread a series of official-looking documents across his kitchen table, each stamped with the red hollow municipal seal. "It's not just Carl," she said, pointing to a contract signed by the mayor. "Half of City Hall is in bed with Apex. I found payment records that make no sense for a security firm this size." Logan scanned the papers. Inflated contracts, bids won with identical proposals, the signatures of officials on documents that should have been confidential. The web of corruption was larger than he had imagined. "These contracts started 4 years ago," the detective continued. "Right around the time the first dogs started disappearing. And look at this." She slid an internal memo toward him. "They're getting copies of all police reports before they're even officially filed." Eco, lying in the corner, lifted his ears at a knock on the door. It was Dana Hale, carrying her own set of evidence. "You're not the first to be suspicious of Apex," Dana revealed, taking a seat at the table. "3 years ago, back in Boulder, I noticed strange patterns in dogs coming to my clinic. They had all been through Apex training, and they all had traces of unauthorized sedatives." A heavy silence fell over the room as she took a deep breath, as if each word was an immense effort. "I gathered evidence. I filed a formal complaint. The next day, my clinic was vandalized. A week later, I lost my license over bogus irregularities that I never committed." The emotional scars she carried were deeper than any physical mark. "It took me 8 months to get my license back, and even then I had to move to a new city." Logan stood up, restless. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I know exactly what they're capable of," she replied, her voice steady. "And because I needed to be sure you wouldn't quit halfway." Sarah organized the documents into neat piles. "Taking down Carl is just the start. Apex has connections to state politicians, too." Donna adjusted her glasses and looked directly at them both. "I'm willing to testify this time. I'm not hiding anymore." Logan looked at the two determined women before him, and at Eco, who now sat attentively, as if he understood the gravity of the situation. The truth about Axel was getting closer, but the danger was growing in equal measure. "Then let's do this right," he said finally. "And this time, we won't be alone." In the back garage of the veterinary clinic, Logan Carter, Dana Hale, and Sarah Quinlan spread documents across a makeshift table. The cold space had been transformed into a clandestine operations center, far from the watchful eyes of Apex Tactical Security. "We have the spreadsheets from the USB, Carl's audio recordings, and Axel's autopsy records," Logan said, running a hand through his hair as he organized the papers. "But we need more to convince the FBI." Dana pointed to photos of the marks found on the deceased canine's neck. "These injections aren't in the official report. That's proof of evidence tampering right there." The detective shook her head, her expression grim. She knew they weren't just facing criminals, but an entire system. Sarah had seen similar cases buried for lack of evidence during her years on the force. "We need to connect Carl directly to the Apex contracts," she explained, opening her laptop. "I found suspicious wire transfers to an account in the Cayman Islands. If we can link that account to him, we'll have our smoking gun." Outside, Eco stood guard, his ears twitching at every sound. The once wary dog now responded to Logan's basic commands with growing confidence. When Logan stepped out to check the perimeter, the animal tilted his head in recognition, a simple gesture that warmed the man's heart. "He's making progress," Dana commented, watching the interaction through the fogged-up window. "So is our case." The veterinarian knew the risk she was taking. Her license had already been suspended once for trying to expose the truth. This time she could lose far more. Yet she remained resolute, driven by the memory of the animals she couldn't save. That night, they worked tirelessly to compile the dossier. Each document was carefully scanned and uploaded to a secure server. Logan insisted they keep physical copies in separate locations, just in case something happened to one of them. Tomorrow, I'll contact my old academy partner at the federal office in Denver, Logan said, closing a binder. Sarah nodded, packing away her electronic device. In the meantime, I'll keep monitoring Carl's movements at the station. He's nervous. He's making mistakes. As the night ended and the trio finally parted ways, each following their own path according to the plan, Logan glanced back at the clinic. He was fighting for Axel, for the lost boy Aiden, and for everyone else they had silenced. Trust, like justice, was being rebuilt, step by step, bark by bark, in the relentless cold of Red Hollow. The Red Hollow sky was a flat, grim gray when Logan Carter got the signal from Eco. The dog, once so timid, was now tracking an invisible trail with grim determination through the snow-dusted pines. There was something different in his behavior, an urgency Logan recognized immediately. After months of dead ends, he suspected they were finally close to something important. Eco led them to an area near the underground tunnel they had discovered weeks earlier. The dog stopped abruptly, sniffing insistently at a wall that appeared solid. Logan examined the structure carefully and found a hidden mechanism that revealed a secret compartment. "Aiden!" he called out, his voice echoing in the confined space. A small movement in the darkness was followed by a muffled sob. The 8-year-old boy, missing for nearly 3 months, was huddled in a corner, malnourished and terrified. "It's okay now," Logan whispered, approaching slowly. "No one's going to hurt you." Aiden's rescue caused an instant commotion in Red Hollow. Ambulances, reporters, and curious onlookers swarmed the site as the boy was rushed to the hospital. Donna Hale was waiting in the emergency room, ready to help with any trauma the boy might have suffered, especially after his time with the mistreated dogs. "Did he mention other places like this?" the veterinarian asked as they watched doctors examine Aiden. "He hasn't said much yet," Logan replied. "But we found documents with the Apex logo in the compartment." News of the rescue spread like wildfire. The local paper splashed Logan and Eco's photo across the front page, highlighting the connection between the child's disappearance and the suspicions surrounding Apex Tactical Security. Sarah Quinlan used the media attention to pressure state authorities for a wider investigation. While the town celebrated Aiden's return, Logan felt the weight of the exposure. Every move he made against Apex made him more vulnerable. Carl Simmons ramped up his veiled threats, and some townspeople with ties to the company began to publicly question his motives. The night after the rescue, alone at home with Eco, Logan stared at Axel's picture on the mantel. The victory was sweet, but it was incomplete. The boy was safe. But how many other victims were still out there? And what would be the ultimate cost of exposing the entire truth? "We're getting there, partner," he murmured to the photograph as Eco rested his head on his knee. The dog looked up as if understanding that this battle was far from over. Logan Carter and Sarah Quinlan walked side by side down the cold corridor of the federal building in Denver. The dossier, the result of weeks of meticulous investigation, felt heavy in Logan's hands. Each page contained not just evidence against Apex Tactical Security, but fragments of the memory of Axel and the other sacrificed K-9s. "You ready for this?" Sarah asked, adjusting her coat as they waited in the antechamber. Her gaze held a mixture of determination and apprehension. "More than ever," he answered, feeling the full weight of his responsibility. The meeting with the federal agents lasted nearly 4 hours. Every document, recording, and spreadsheet was analyzed. The connections between the security firm, local politicians, and Axel's death painted a map of corruption that stretched far beyond what any of them had initially imagined. 3 days later, Red Hollow awoke to the thrum of helicopters and the blur of federal vehicles. The operation was swift and precise. 12 arrest warrants were served before noon. Apex employees were escorted from their offices as agents carried out boxes of documents and computer hardware. Dana Hale watched it all from the window of her clinic. A profound sense of relief and vindication washed over her as she saw the empire that had tried to silence her finally crumble. When her phone rang with Logan's emotional voice on the other end, she could only whisper, "It was worth it." In the local diner, the smell of coffee and toast filled the air as residents huddled around the television, trying to escape the biting cold. The news showed images of the tunnel and featured interviews with families of other missing children. Initial disbelief gave way to a collective outrage. The same people who had turned their backs on Logan now spoke his name with respect. "Always knew there was something wrong with that company," one old-timer commented, conveniently rewriting his own memory. That evening, as a fresh layer of snow began to fall on Red Hollow, Logan let Eco run freely in his backyard. The dog, once so distrustful, now played in the snow as if celebrating a newfound freedom. Sarah arrived with coffee and an update. 3 more arrests in Boulder, all connected to the scheme. "This is just the beginning," she said, handing him a steaming mug. The FBI found records of similar operations in 3 other states. As they watched Eco, the trust between the 2 investigators solidified, as hard and clear as the ice covering the town's streets. Justice, which had seemed buried alongside Axel, was now rising, powerful and undeniable, melting the shroud of silence that had suffocated Red Hollow for so long. Logan Carter watched from the steamed-up window of the diner, his heart hammering against his ribs. At the counter, Sarah Quinlan was strategically positioned, her face hidden behind the local paper as federal agents fanned out across the parking lot. Carl Simmons walked in, just as he did every morning, greeting acquaintances with his usual easy smile. The inspector seemed oblivious that anything was amiss. He ordered his customary black coffee and sat at his favorite table near the fireplace. "Morning, Carl," Logan said, approaching slowly. The inspector's face hardened at the sight of his old friend. His gaze darted around the room, clocking Sarah at the counter and 2 unfamiliar men blocking the back exit. "It's over, Carl," Logan said, his voice low. "The FBI has everything. Apex, Axel, the children." A heavy silence fell over the diner. The regulars, many of whom had known Carl for decades, stopped their conversations to watch the scene unfold. An elderly woman raised a hand to her mouth in shock. "You don't understand anything, Logan," Carl replied, his voice betraying a tremor of nerves. "Some things must be sacrificed for the greater good." As the inspector reached for his weapon, Sarah was already behind him, her hand clamping down on his wrist. "Carl Simmons," one of the federal agents announced, stepping forward with handcuffs. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and complicity in crimes against persons and animals." The townspeople watched, stunned, as the man who had represented the law in Red Hollow for 15 years was cuffed and escorted out. A waitress dropped a cup, the sound of it shattering on the floor, echoing the community's broken trust. For Logan, the moment was more than just justice. Watching his old friend being placed in the federal vehicle, he felt a tangled mess of relief and sorrow. Carl had been his mentor, the best man at his wedding, the man who had comforted him when his parents died. Now he was just the traitor who had signed Axel's death warrant. Sarah came to his side and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did it, Logan. Axel would be proud." He nodded, feeling the immense weight of the past few months finally begin to lift. At the station, Eco was waiting for him, a living symbol that new bonds of loyalty could be forged from the ashes of betrayal. Red Hollow would never be the same, but as the federal car drove away, Logan thought that was exactly what the town needed. The empire of Apex tactical security crumbled in a matter of weeks. Public contracts were canceled one by one as federal investigators sifted through every document and record. The scandal spread like wildfire across Colorado, sparking outrage in neighboring communities that had also employed their services. From the conference room at the Red Hollow station, Logan watched the news with a mixture of relief and melancholy. Reports detailed how Apex had manipulated police dog training, discarding K-9s considered defective or those who might expose operational secrets. Axel had been just one of many. "They'll pay for every one of them," said Dana Hale, entering the room with a folder. The veterinarian, who had tried for years to expose the abusive practices, was now being invited to speak on animal protection to police departments across the state. Her testimony had been crucial in dismantling the operation. "And the governor signed Axel's law today," Sarah Quinlan added, showing off her new Chief of Investigations badge. "It stipulates that no K-9 can be decommissioned without independent oversight and specialized veterinary care." The detective smiled faintly, knowing her promotion was more than personal recognition. It was a paradigm shift for the entire force. Logan's phone rang. It was the mayor, inviting him to return to service with full honors. After months of suspension, of facing down looks of suspicion, he was now a local hero. He ended the call, his thoughts adrift, and stroked the head of Eco, who never left his side. "Are you going to accept?" Dana asked, noticing his hesitation. "I don't know yet," he answered. "But for the first time in a long time, I can finally sleep without the nightmares." In the state detention center, Carl Simmons and 5 other Apex executives awaited trial. The charges ranged from animal cruelty to involvement in the disappearance of children. The scheme that had seemed untouchable had collapsed like a house of cards. That afternoon, Logan drove to the cemetery. He placed flowers on Axel's memorial, now graced with an official plaque recognizing his service. Beside it, a framed photo showed the dog in his K-9 uniform, his gaze alert and his posture dignified. "We did it, partner," he murmured, the cold, red, hollow wind brushing against his face. For the first time since Axel's death, he felt not just the chill, but the profound peace that comes when justice is finally served. The scars would remain, Logan knew, but now they carried the pride of a battle won against a corrupt system that had once seemed invincible. The Red Hollow Community Hall was packed. Residents of all ages had gathered on that cold winter afternoon for a moment the small town would never forget. Blue and silver streamers decorated the space, and a mural of honor featuring photos of Axel and other service dogs covered the main wall. Logan Carter stepped onto the small, makeshift stage, his hands trembling as he adjusted the microphone. His crisp uniform was a stark contrast to the redness in his eyes, a telltale sign of sleepless nights. At his side, Eco sat attentively, watching his every move. "Axel wasn't just my partner," Logan began, his voice thick with emotion, echoing through the silent hall. He represented everything we should be: loyal, brave, and incorruptible. He paused, taking a deep breath as he looked out at the sea of faces. What we uncovered in this town was bigger than any of us could have imagined. But that truth only came to light because one dog refused to be forgotten. From the front row, Dana Hale watched, her misty eyes reflecting a deep sense of pride. The vet who had risked her career to help now had the recognition she deserved. Beside her, Sarah Quinlan gave Logan a subtle nod, a silent gesture of mutual respect. Today, we don't just celebrate the fall of the guilty, he continued. We honor those who paid the highest price for our safety. His words were punctuated by the occasional distant bark from the other canines attending the ceremony, as if in agreement. The mayor of Red Hollow, visibly moved, stepped onto the stage to present a Medal of Valor to Eco. The dog, once skittish and wary, now sat with quiet dignity as the golden badge was fastened to his new official collar. This medal, the mayor explained, symbolizes not only Eco's courage, but our promise that we will never again turn a blind eye to injustice, no matter who it is against. The family of Aiden, the rescued child, applauded with fervor. The boy's mother couldn't hold back her tears when Logan mentioned how Eco's instincts had been instrumental in finding her son. At the end of the ceremony, as people shared stories and memories, Donna approached Logan. "Axel would be so proud," she said, adjusting the German Shepherd pin on her jacket. Logan smiled, watching Eco receive gentle pats from the children. "Justice takes many forms," he replied. "Sometimes it comes on four paws, with a heart bigger than any of ours." That afternoon, under the overcast sky, Red Hollow didn't just honor its canine heroes. It was reborn with the promise of a future where loyalty and truth would triumph over any corruption. 6 months had passed since the bark that changed everything echoed through Red Hollow. Snow still blanketed the streets, but as Logan Carter walked through the cemetery, the air itself felt different. Beside him, Eco trotted with a newfound confidence, his coat gleaming in the weak winter sun. The dog, once a bundle of nerves, now proudly wore the Medal of Valor that hung from his collar. Logan stopped at Axel's grave. The last time he was here, he'd been consumed by grief. Now the site was covered with fresh flowers and small plaques bearing messages of gratitude. "For the hero who barked when everyone else fell silent," one of them read. Logan knelt, the cold of the snow seeping through his pants as he traced the name carved into the stone. Since the fall of Apex and the imprisonment of Carl, the town was breathing again. Dana Hale had expanded her veterinary clinic and now coordinated a rehabilitation program for retired working dogs, finally at peace with her mission. At the station, Sarah Quinlan was leading with a firm hand, implementing strict new protocols of transparency. The detective, once defined by loss, was now a symbol of renewal for the entire force. Her first act as chief was to establish a permanent memorial for all the K9s who had served the community. Eco's nose twitched, and he trotted a few yards ahead, stopping before another plot. Logan followed, recognizing the place where other dogs, victims of the scheme, had finally been given a proper burial. Little Aiden, the boy they'd rescued, was a regular visitor, leaving colorful drawings for the four-legged heroes with his family. The people of Red Hollow, who had once eyed Logan with suspicion, now greeted him on the street. The local diner had even created a sandwich in Axel's honor, with a portion of the profits going to a fund for veterinary care. Logan took a deep breath, the frigid air filling his lungs. Justice had found its way through the snow and ice, a reminder that even on the coldest nights, the truth will eventually find the light. He looked at Eco, who met his gaze with the kind of unconditional loyalty only a dog can offer. "Let's go home, partner," he said, turning to leave. The patrol car was waiting, and there was work to be done. Because everyone in Red Hollow now knew that when justice seems to fall silent, it's only catching its breath to bark even louder.